From what I got to experience a full quiet, you'd think that it's the kind of game that's just right for me, but that wasn't the case. It's because despite coming off as a survival horror NES game, there's a lot to it that makes it stand out in both good and bad ways. I'd say that the good outweighs the bad, but seeing as how this is a first impressions video, that's not entirely true. FQ's music drew me in. It's atmospheric NES music that's simple, but it's appropriate. Sometimes games feature OSTs where it's clear that the mindset was more is more, but the truth is that sometimes less really is more. You could say it depends on the overall context, and with what FQ's music set out to do, it approached this aspect of the game just right. Being that this is a modern NES release, FQ wants to draw you in immediately. Like I already mentioned, it accomplished that with the music, but the same could be said of its visuals. I thought that FQ featured great-looking backgrounds. Not only that, I liked its cool color palette. FQ made it so that its areas stood apart despite being small parts of a larger piece. This, along with other aspects of the game that I'll eventually get into, made it so that it's an incredibly atmospheric game. I wish I could say that was seen all throughout FQ, but then I'd be lying. Like I mentioned, FQ seemed like it'd be just right for me, seeing as how I'm a massive survival horror fan, but I guess it's because the survival horror games I love have a different approach. What I mean is that FQ comes off as if Resident Evil 1 were almost fully open from the beginning. That ended up creating issues for me because as a result of how open-ended FQ is, it's pretty easy to end up lost and disoriented. FQ has a cool grid-based map, and by that description alone, you'd think that navigating through the game would be simple, but it wasn't. Even when there were visual landmarks that helped me orient myself, I still found myself getting lost more than I would have liked. This eventually spilled over into another area of the game that would lead to more frustration. FQ is one of those games that has a time mechanic. It's like the one that's in Majora's Mask, but at the same time, it's not. I mentioned that to give a better idea of how FQ worked and why this aspect of the game was difficult to deal with. You could say that the games force you to juggle multiple things at the same time, and that's one of the reasons why they're fun in the first place, but getting things right is of great importance. It'd be like trying to juggle objects that greatly vary in size. Some skilled players/jugglers would have no problem with that, but other players, such as myself, would be overwhelmed by that. The sense of being overwhelmed in FQ came as a result of the fact that at one point you're instantly killed at night. It started to happen so often that I was feeling scared because I knew that this happening was just around the corner, but I still had to push through in order to try to reach a save point or simply figure out what I needed to do. I played a decent amount of FQ, but it's possible that due to not having played it to completion, I didn't figure out what was necessary to overcome this instant death that would occur at night. I started to feel restricted by this because even if it wasn't nighttime, FQ would eventually get to the point where it was more or less telling you, hey, you're running out of time and probably gonna die soon. Not only did that start to leave me feeling dread, I felt pressured to make things happen. The problem is that the majority of the time I kept running into roadblocks that led to me dying and reloading, over and over again. A great deal of my time with FQ was spent using guess and check, mainly in the hopes that I'd stumble into a new area/item that would help push me in the right direction. That mindset helped out a lot because it's one of the ways that I was able to progress through as much of FQ as I did. You could say that this feeling of helplessness was done on purpose, and the point was to overcome that, but at times I felt like I was going in too blind. There were times when I accidentally stumbled into solutions/new areas by mistake more than once. Simply being able to progress is great, but at the same time, I felt like I was playing the game out of order. I'd reach an area without knowing when it was appropriate to be there. At the same time, I didn't like feeling as if I lacked control over what I experienced in FQ. Rather than feeling like I was playing the game, I felt like it was playing me. The thing is, with previous survival horror games, there was a point where I'd get the hang of it, and the ball would get rolling. There were small instances of that in FQ, but overall, I frequently felt stumped and as if I really didn't know how to play it. The fact that I was able to progress means that I'm capable of beating this game, but at the same time, it requires a lot of attention. Seeing as how I'm regularly playing new games, I can't/don't play as I used to when I was a kid. Long gone are the days when I would try to squeeze every bit out of a game because that's all I had for X amount of time. FQ is the kind of game that's an experience that wants you to fully pay attention to it and be able to overcome its difficulties as a result of how observant you are. That's especially true due to how it features more than one kind of puzzle. I thought that the fuse puzzles that were necessary in order to restore power were neither hard nor easy. The consequence of failing to complete one was fair, but it still sucked. It's because it made use of limited objects that worked as attempts towards completing a puzzle. If you ran out of fuses, you'd be forced to look for more in order to attempt to advance. I don't know if it's possible to do so poorly that you end up stuck with no way of advancing, but from what I experienced, I get the feeling that's possible. The idea of that is sure to excite some players, seeing as how Resident Evil 1 was the kind of game that really made you learn from your mistakes. What I mean is that it was possible to end up completely stuck because of having limited ammo, healing items, or health. You were meant to play in a conservative manner, and that's also seen in FQ. As cheesy as it may sound, FQ is more about offering an experience rather than just being another game to be played and forgotten about. I didn't beat it, but it managed to make an impression. It's possible that I would have gotten more out of it had it been a more restrictive experience, but at the same time, that would have probably ruined what makes full quiet. It's cliche as hell and may be inappropriate for a video discussing a game, but the saying, "It's not you, it's me," comes to mind. What I mean is that even though I do feel I have valid complaints towards full quiet, at the end of the day, it's more about me not having completely adjusted to what it had to offer. The fact that I've described full quiet as an experience rather than just another game says more than enough about it. I'm a fan of games that make me think and that remind me of beloved games I played back during my formative years, but at the same time, I don't want to feel like I'm barely understanding the game. I could just be making a mountain out of a molehill, and full quiet really isn't as puzzling as I make it out to be, but at the same time, these are my thoughts after having played it for nearly 11 hours. One thing I frequently find myself saying is different strokes for different folks. What was a struggle for me may be a breeze for you. For some people, the struggle is simply part of the journey, but like I said before, I want to feel like I'm playing a game rather than it being the other way around. It could be that I'm just not as attentive of a player as I need to be able to overcome full quiet and its challenges. What I do know is that from what I got out of it, it's worth coming back to at a later point in time. If you're a fan of retro-styled games that force you to think outside of the box, give Full Quiet a try. If you're more about linear survival horror games, you're still welcome to give Full Quiet a try, but chances are that you may end up feeling the same way that I do. At any point, have you played a game that left you feeling as if it were playing you? Have you ever encountered games that left you feeling overwhelmed due to how much they had to offer? How do you feel about games that can be played out of order? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much for watching.